of my hot fat guys, gals, non-binary, and trans pals. I'm Alex Frankel, the CEO and founder of the Hot Fat Guy Club and the host of the Hot Fat Guy Club podcast. And we have a very special guest today, the author of Body Type, a wonderful Substack page, and a dear new friend of mine, Mikala Jamison. Mikala, how are you today?
I am great, Alex. Thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
I'm so excited that you are here because I actually discovered you through on Twitter through a friend of mine, Olivia Dreitzen Howell. I think she retweeted something of yours, and then I did a very deep dive on all of the things that you've ever written. And I was just like, oh my God, I have to interview you and have you on the podcast.
Yay.
You are also the first female guest that we have had on the Hot Fat Guy Club podcast. So
wow, what an honor.
Welcome. I'm very happy to have the alternative perspective, and it's an honor for me that you agreed to come on the show. So Mikala, just to give everyone a quick little rundown on who you are. You're a professional editor and freelance writer who is also a curator of discourse about bodies and body image in the modern era. She publishes the best-selling Substack Body Type, a 2-time Substack featured publication to offer essays and insights on those topics. You're currently working on your first book, which is super exciting. And you just had a show that was named Best of Fringe by DC Theater, the body show for the Capitol Fringe Festival.
Yeah, that's right. That just wrapped up last week. So I'm kind of this week just coming down off of the live performance cloud. So I'm glad to just be in my home talking to one person instead of having to do another show, which was amazing, but a lot of energy. So but it was great.
There's the post performance adrenaline crash is such a unique crash.
Yes, it really is. It's like you don't, I feel like you're in a weird kind of like blackout through the whole performance, and it's awesome, but then it's also hard to really, at least for me, like be present and enjoy it until it's over and you have a second to like catch your breath and recalibrate. But it's a great experience because writing on the Substack, it's really me, it's just my voice, and then of course communicating with the readers. But having the show, I invite other people to come onto the stage and tell their body stories. So having other people talk about their bodies and their body image and their body experiences it's so great because they're so unlike my own. And so those stories are really important to me to hear.
So how did you end up becoming a writer that specializes in talking about body image and things like that? What was your journey that brought you to this point?
I went to school for English and journalism, and I knew I wanted to work in some kind of written communication, and I worked for newspapers and websites and things. And so that set me up for the day job of becoming a reporter and an editor. And I always dabbled a little bit like in arts and culture and entertainment, like that was kind of my beat. But it was when I had my first job in Philadelphia, I was like the arts and culture editor, but I was writing just about arts and culture in Philadelphia. So it was very localized. It wasn't until later in my 20s when I dealt with and went to treatment for the eating disorder that I had, which was binge eating disorder. I was just going through a really self-abusive time in my life, and coming out of the other side of that, of course, I was thinking about my own body a lot. It's like all I did was think and talk and cry and write about my own body, which was painful, but necessary and good, and ultimately helped me heal. And I had the experience of also getting really into strength training and weightlifting and working out in a way that this isn't the case for everyone when it comes to an eating disorder recovery. For some people, exercise is the opposite of what's going to be helpful for them. But for me, it just made me feel really good and really powerful and connected to my body again after years of feeling really disconnected from it. So all of that thinking about body stuff, that started to feel like that's what my niche should be. It was really like the write what you know kind of ethos of like, okay, this is it. This is like the water that I'm swimming in. And I know I'm not the only one that's thinking about this shit all the time. So why not turn it into a space on the internet and see who arrives in that space? And I'm so happy that some people have arrived to that space.
I remember when I had that realization that I'm not the only person that feels this way all the time, and how unbelievably fucking refreshing that was.
Yeah.
When you're just like, oh, everyone is this insecure about their body?
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
What?
And especially like as a woman, that's kind of baked into the culture. Like it is for men and non-binary folks too, but I feel like there's a unique way that it's like, be insecure all the time, buy stuff to fix it, feel bad about yourself, keep buying stuff. Like that was my whole life. And so I knew that other women felt that way, but there was a way that we weren't like talking about it. There was a way that
Mm-hmm.
we weren't diving into really what it feels like to be preoccupied by and almost at war with your own body all the time, no matter what you looked like. Because at some point, I'm looking around like, okay, so the skinny girls I know still feel this way. The fat girls like me at the time, they feel this way. My mom feels this way. My aunts feel like we all feel this way, even though we all look different. So, like, what the hell is that about?
Yeah, that was, I had a similar moment of realization for that, where I used to run this CrossFit gym
Mm,
in Midtown, and I'm a big and tall model with Wilhelmina Models, and
mhm,
the sports and fitness board of that agency this is before I was signed there, used to come to this gym all the time, and I ended up becoming friends with a lot of those models. And these are the people that are like in all of the Nike ads, all
yeah.
of the Lululemon ads, like insert sports brand here. And if they're not an athlete, they're a former athlete and they're
Mhm,
doing this.
mhm,
And they were equally, if not more insecure
yeah.
about themselves. And like, these are the people who have the most picturesque, socially acceptable body types.
Yep.
And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, shit.
Right.
They feel the same way I do.
Right. It's not just the call is coming from inside the house. The call is coming from like inside the culture, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what I try to write about, is what I call body culture, which is just look around at how we think, talk, behave, have beliefs, shape opinions when it comes to bodies. That is what I'm trying to tease apart, because it's everywhere, from what celebrities do to how people talk at your office to what's going on in pop culture, movies, whatever. There is so much body stuff that is changing all the time and staying the same since, like, our great grandparents were dealing with some of this shit. So that is what
Right.
I find just fascinating and important. Yeah.
Yep. It's also so, I made a video last week. I'm a researchaholic, and I found
Mhm.
a paper that was written in 2002 and published in 2004 about measuring male body image. And one of
Mhm.
the most wild things, I'm pretty sure I have images here. Hold on. There were two things that were noted in the paper about how the culture of the fetishization and eroticization of the male body has
Mhm.
changed over time.
Mhm.
And the two examples they used were, one, GI Joes, and
Oh,
how the original GI Joes were just like, regular dudes.
right,
And
right.
then over the course of about 25 years, GI Joe packed on like 30 pounds of muscle
Oh,
and
yeah.
is all of a sudden this like roided out freak of a human being.
Yeah.
And it's insane how much of a change there is between the two.
Yeah.
And then Playgirl magazine,
Mhm.
they calculated the BMIs of the cover models of Playgirl magazine,
Oh,
and
wow.
over the course of 25 years they gained uh 27 pounds of muscle and lost about 12% of their BMI.
My God, that is
And
something else.
it's absolutely incredible, because these are, there's not a lot of men that are, well, there, there's not a lot of like 12-year-old boys that are looking at Playgirl magazine saying, I
Right.
have to look this way.
Yeah.
But if this is the overarching idea, like I wrote a blog post last week about how when I was a teenager, I used to love going to Barnes and Noble, looking in the magazine section, because I was a car guy. I liked looking at
Mm,
all the car magazines. And then on the other side of that, it's like Matthew McConaughey, Brad Pitt, George Clooney have 8 million abs or be fat and worthless and no one will ever love you, kind of thing.
right.
And
Right.
I'm constantly looking at myself in the mirror versus my other friends and my peers and other students in high school. And
Mhm.
I can see that I'm so visibly different, and I'm being made fun of it and constantly reminded of it all the time. And
Right.
at that point, there's only so much control I can have over what my weight is when I'm 15 years old,
Sure. Sure.
and that pressure to be thin, to be muscular, to look a certain way, and the
Mhm.
idea that you can only have the life you want if you look within this certain binary is not
Mhm.
only so limiting, but so fucking poisonous
Right. Right.
to your psyche, that I'm glad we live in a time now where it's a larger conversation that we're actually allowed to talk about. And at the
Yeah.
end of the day, this is just a meat sack.
Yeah.
This does not decide your worth as a human being.
Right. And it's really, it's important to hear. I think that sometimes, just from my perspective among other women like me, like, yes, I would say that you can certainly, I think it goes without saying that for the most part, women have been privy to like really intensely harmful body and beauty standards. Like, yes, without question. And we have been, those have been levied against us in particular ways, and in ways that maybe we feel like with more depth than some
Mm-hmm.
men feel. But we can't say that men like do not feel this. Like, men are still looking at exactly what you just said. That study about like how the GI Joes and everything has changed, that is a product of the culture. Like, I wrote a blog post for Substack like last year, I think, about like how people respond to men with eating disorders. And I think there is
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a stunning lack of empathy in most cases, even though 1 in 3 people with an eating disorder is a man. I think that
Mm-hmm.
it almost, I think, is this idea, this is the argument that I made, that maybe people think that men are kind of like impervious to this in a way that I don't actually think that they are, or like they can take it, or it's not a big deal, or like it's, well, we're just punching up when we make fun of men because men are the ones, in power or whatever. I understand like little bits and pieces of why these attitudes exist, but like point blank, like what you just said, this is bad for men too. And if it's bad for men who are part of our culture, it is bad for the culture. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what a society is. Like, there are
Right.
people all throughout the society who are looking at these images. Like, in the blog post I wrote, I used Hugh Jackman as Wolverine as the
Mm-hmm.
example. He looked totally different when he was Wolverine at 35 or whatever than he does now. Like you said, the
Yes.
GI Joe, 40 pounds of muscle, shredded as fuck in the abs. He looks so different. Like, there was a post on Instagram or somewhere yesterday where the guy that was in that show Desperate Housewives, that was like the
Mm-hmm.
gardener, like that someone
Yeah.
was having an affair with, and he looks like, I mean, like a fit dude, but like just a kind of a normal dude. And the first comment under that was, if this show happened today, he would not look like that. He would be
Yeah.
way more shredded, way more jacked. Like, we can't pretend that this is not happening. So that's why I
Right.
think we have to talk about it.
He'd be like one of the beefcakes on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Was it when the guy that plays Mac, posted the thing about his body transformation?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, he's one of my heroes for
Yeah,
that.
he's
But also
great.
just like the recurring joke of all of these absolutely shredded, roided
Mhm.
up, ripped dudes that they have that Mac is like
Yeah.
overtly attracted to.
Yeah.
That's such a funny recurring bit in the show because they know they're so on top of all of this. They know exactly what they're doing when they make those jokes.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the women's issue, the woman's issue of beauty standards, like who created those fucking beauty standards, right?
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
was a bunch of men in advertising agencies in the 50s and 60s that created this like modern beauty standard.
Hmm.
And there's never really been a conversation about what issues were they having with their own fucking bodies that made, like, one, yes, they wanted to, absolutely 100% wanted to exert control over women
Hmm.
because that's the unfortunate nature of a patriarchal society. And part of the reason, having been in the men's space of the body positivity, body acceptance, and body neutrality movement as long as I have been,
Hmm.
you have to consider the masculinity effects on this, and like where the state of patriarchy and traditional masculinity in the United States, especially, the number one tenet of traditional masculinity ideology is the resistance to all things feminine.
Hmm.
And that's one of the major reasons why men are so far behind in that conversation, is
Hmm.
because the body positivity, body acceptance, and body neutrality movements were primarily led by women.
Right.
And there's always going to be that resistance of like, nah, bro, can't do that.
Yeah.
No, can't do it.
Right. Right.
And the the women who were the original trailblazers in those spaces were, one, fucking fearless, and two, thank God they did, because thank God we're actually having these conversations, because so much of that plays into the state of men currently.
Hmm.
And the body image portion of that conversation, I personally think, is one of the most left out.
Hmm.
When you look good, you feel good. When you feel good about how you look, you feel good about yourself. When
Hmm.
every message in everywhere in the world, regardless if you're too skinny or if you're quote unquote too fat, or if you don't fit it, if you don't look like Brad Pitt in Fight Club or Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and you feel all of that overt pressure to be more muscular, to look like a superhero, that seeps into every single part of your life. And that resentment that you feel for yourself, if you don't have the tools to deal with it, which a lot of men, quite frankly, do not,
Right.
because, you know, the second tenet of traditional masculinity ideology is the restriction of the expression of vulnerable or caring emotions. It's a whole other part of the conversation. But you're going to start to take those bad feelings that you have for yourself, project them onto other people, and make everything worse for everyone around you.
Exactly. Like, it's poisonous for the culture when we have people within the culture suffering under these tenets that we're upholding that are bad for all of us. I mean, I hate this idea that we're not thinking about the future when it comes to this stuff a little bit. Like, I'm thinking of the generations below us, or thinking about those of us who might have children in this culture. Like, if I had a son who was raised as like a cis boy looking at these images and thinking that he needs to look a certain way, I I can't be thinking this is only like a female problem. Like, this is something that I want to protect and try to counteract for everyone in my life. And so I understand that so many women my age in particular, I feel like we're trying really hard to break cycles and undo the work. I mean, my mother, our mothers, we had like, the body image stuff that was imposed upon us was so poisonous. And so there's some stuff that, like, I think even just the baby boomer generation, one generation above mine, this is like a whole new world to them. It was not that long ago. It was in my teenage years that, like, the diet talk was like unbelievable. Like, look at how our movies were and everything, right? Like, it was not that long ago. So I think people are pushing really, really hard to undo this and counteract it. And that's so important for so many women. But we can't leave people who are not women out of this either. And I think that all that, it feels like so much work to do that maybe we kind of like want to give up sometimes. But really what I think it takes is like just having conversations with each other about it, like what we're doing here, listening to other people, like reviewing other people's content about it, and just hearing like, oh yeah, it's all of us. It's truly all of us. So all of us have to work however we can to kind of push back against some of this stuff.
The thing that always tends to frustrate me the most is the idea that being fat is a personal, moral, and ethical failure, which is not fucking true. Like, that shit always drives me insane. And I get comments on social media all the time of like, you're promoting an unhealthy lifestyle. I'm like, when did I promote anything other than not hating yourself?
Right.
I have never told anyone to not exercise. I've never told anyone to not try to eat well. I've never told anyone to do anything other than to be a little less evil to yourself in the way that you speak to yourself.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we are all our own worst enemy. None of us have spent more time with anyone else in our lives more than ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's left out of the just like body image pressure conversation is we know how to push our own buttons the worst. Like, we've spent the most time internalizing all of the things, horrible things that other people have said to us about our bodies. And especially when you're a kid and you don't have the tools to know that like this person is projecting their own insecurities onto you.
Right.
You know, when an adult that you trust says that, oh, you're fat, you need to lose weight, like you're XYZ thing because of this thing on your body.
Yeah.
You accept that as the truth, and turns into this horrible symphony of sickness in your mind.
Right.
That, you know, the things that my bullies ever said to me about my man boobs or my cankles or my fucking being whatever when I was in middle school and high school pales in comparison to the things that I used to say to myself.
Oh yeah, forget it. I mean, and that's something like, I think the number one word that like flashes as a neon sign when I like think about my work and the stuff I want to talk about when it comes to this stuff is just like this idea of honesty. Like, I really want people to feel like we can all just be honest about how this stuff has hurt us, how we have hurt ourselves with this stuff because of like the indoctrination that we've faced. And I bring that up because when you just said I think it's great to raise that point that like we are meanest to ourselves. I encounter a lot of discussion from mostly my girlfriends who will say like, I had this thought that like I just wanted to lose weight, or like I'm getting married and I want my arms to be skinnier, or like all of this like body stuff. And they feel bad that they feel that way, because it's like, well, I want to rise above that. Like, I don't want to be in that place anymore, which is like a well-intentioned. I get it. Like, I don't want to be there either. It sucks there. But then it's like they're mean to themselves for having those thoughts, which were like planted in us since we were little girls, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you are not bad for having a moment where you're like mean to yourself about your body, because you were taught to be mean to yourself about your body. Like,
Right.
it's very important to do what you can to try to come out of that space. But I think if you're not like switched out of that space the second you see like an Instagram graphic about body positivity or whatever, it's okay. Like, it takes time. I think it
Yeah.
takes a lot of time to undo this programming that, like, I've had for the first 30 years of my life, right?
Right.
So
Right.
it's that, I think gentleness is required there too, that like it's a process. And like, I write all about like, I want to feel better in my body. I want to help other people feel better, but I still have days where I get weird in my head about my body. And you just have to know, like, okay, that's what you've been conditioned to think. Like, the next step is, how do you change that? What do you really believe? Like, what do you really value? What are you working toward?
People ask me a lot, like, can I still be a hot fat guy if I'm trying to lose weight? And I'm like,
Mm,
yes,
hmm.
yes, you're a hot fat guy, even if you are ripped to shit, because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I always, we all have our little, like, the angel and the devil in us. And
Hmm.
it's not the angel or the devil, but it's the fat part of it. It's the fat person and the skinny person. And if you're a
Yeah.
person who has been fat their whole life and lost a shit ton of weight, I lost 175 pounds from 2015 to 2018.
Wow.
And when I looked in the mirror, I always saw the biggest version of myself, even when I was at my smallest.
Mm-hmm.
Always saw that. And one of the things that I was super duper conscious about was to give as much grace as possible to my former fat self, because
Yeah.
I knew every other weight loss experience that I had ever had, I always gained the weight back at one
Yeah.
point or another. And I always knew that I would be back to that. It was never going to be a permanent change, right?
Right. Right.
That part of you and who you were in the past is always going to be a part of you.
Yeah.
And the people now who's a lot of the trolls in my comments who are, who their whole personality revolves around Andrew Tate and the gym. I'm like, talk to
Mm.
me when you're in your 60s, bud.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
going to look like me one day.
Right.
This is going to happen.
And
You need
here's
to
the
take
thing.
some notes.
Even if you don't, even if you are one of those people, like, I know people that have just been, they're in their 70s or getting close to their 80s, and like, maybe they just are people that are smaller people. That's
Yep.
fine. But this comes down to values, right? Like, what do we value within ourselves about our bodies and what matters to us in our bodies? And what do we value when it comes to how we treat other people? Like, period. I don't I don't really give a shit what anyone else is doing with their body. Like, I hope
Mm-hmm.
that whatever they are doing is aligned with their values and makes them feel good. Like you just said, if someone, like, people have asked me that, like, do you think people should try to lose weight? And I'm like, I'm not giving anybody any kind of should. That is
Yeah.
you and your journey. I hope whatever you are doing with your body comes down to, you are doing it in a sane, safe, and sustainable way. That is like the main thing for me. I don't like, because I lost a bunch of weight too. I lost like 70 pounds like over 10 years ago. And I had exactly the same thought of like, okay, can I be someone who values body acceptance or body neutrality, or anything that is not diet culture? Can I do that as someone who lost weight? And I really just think, like, for me, that was a matter of recovering from an eating disorder. So everyone has a different relationship to why their weight changes or does not change. I think ultimately it's at this point in your life, this is a forever project, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
how you deal with your body. So if at this point in your life you are facing a context that means your body changes, it gets bigger, it gets smaller, whatever's happening with it, that's just a self check in. Where are my
Mm-hmm.
values right now? How do I feel about this right now? Because exactly like you said, Alex, like, it might change. You might fluctuate. You might get in an accident, you can't work out anymore. Like, a lot of times gym people, I say this as like a gym person who was employed in the space, I think gym people believe that they're like invincible because
Mm-hmm.
they work out or because they're fit.
Mm-hmm.
Anything could happen and completely change your relationship to your body,
Yeah.
or you have a kid, you get pregnant, like anything. So it really is like you just have to be willing to go back to, what do I value when it comes to my body, even if my body is different right now, or even if I find it really hard to like, right, or accept right now
Mm-hmm.
for some reason or another.
So when I would be curious to talk to you about this, when someone is going in the beginning of just learning how to like their body at any size,
Mm-hmm.
what was your experience like in that? When all of this first started, like what were the things that you focused on
Mm-hmm.
to change your relationship with the, thought patterns that had been instilled into you to hate your body versus finding that acceptance, that love, that care for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that for me, it came down to this how I treated myself
Mm-hmm.
question, because when I was at the worst part of my binge eating disorder, I was also like binge drinking. I just was like everything in my life was like so irresponsible and abusive when it came to my relationship to my physical self. And so, going through a period of losing weight, and this is 10 years ago, like things are different than, 5 years ago, things were really different. So this has been like a journey of like what people are talking about when it comes to body culture. And more than a decade ago, I was very like, I lost weight. Yay, hooray. That's it. That's what I wanted to do. That's yay for me. I'll be like this forever. I had some very like messed up ideas of that bodily experience. Years later, after learning more about myself and what I wanted and what my values are, and seeing all of these body related movements that are such a necessary corrective in our culture, it really started to matter more to me that regardless of what my body looked like or what its size was, it's about how I felt I was treating it and what I
Mm-hmm.
was doing with and for it. And so for me, very quickly, it just became obvious that I am someone who, if I am not doing some kind of movement, if I am not exercising, and that doesn't have to be in the gym every day, but like that, I just feel like I go nuts and don't feel good in my body if I don't move my body. Like, and that's
Mm-hmm.
that's not like a groundbreaking statement. Like I think we all know that. That can be completely divorced from anything having to do with your weight or your size. We're just talking about
Right.
movement.
Right.
So I feel like I started to really feel good about, or just more connected to, like forget love, forget accept. I'm talking about like I just knew my body again. I
Mm-hmm.
felt my body again. For me, that happened through exercise, strength training in particular, because I did like cardio and shit my whole life because it was always about like just burn the calories, just burn off, the 6 almonds you ate for lunch or whatever. This was, oh no,
Ah.
this was, I felt I felt just like powerful. And also there was something in it about like how women, what exercise women were quote unquote supposed to do. And so
Mm-hmm.
getting into the weight room as a woman, I felt like in a way, this sounds so like, it sounds more like highfalutin than I mean it to, but I just kind of felt like I was rejecting something that I had been told I was supposed to do. Like, oh no,
Yeah.
you go lift weights and get in the space where like only men are supposed to be, and like fuck you. You know what I mean?
That's how
So
I used to feel when I would take Pilates like
yeah.
reformer classes or
Oh
go to
my God,
super
yeah.
bougie yoga classes in New York City, where I'm
Uh-huh.
like, on one hand, like I am who I am, and I'm like, I am the only man here. And then on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, I'm the only fucking man here,
Right.
like I'm here
Yeah.
shirtless and in tights. Like this is how comfortable I am with my fucking manhood.
That's fantastic. I love that.
But and there is something so special to be said about like stepping into those spaces where you
Mhm.
feel like you don't belong and where you feel like there is that societal pressure that says no,
Yeah.
no, wrong, you're not,
Right.
this is not for you, when in
Right.
fact it absolutely is.
Yeah, exactly. And when you asked about like starting to feel better in my body, that storytelling show that I just told you that I did, the body show, one of the things I said when I was telling like my story on stage was, when I was 31, I signed up for a powerlifting meet and I trained and did a powerlifting meet, which was so much fun and such a great, like, just an affirming, awesome, like body experience. And when I was training for that, like I gained weight because I gained a lot of muscle, but I also
Mm-hmm.
was like eating like peanut butter protein bars all day long and just like having a great time, like working out and eating because you need to eat to work out. And that was like the first time. I mean, I hate to say it, but again, it's just like the shit that you're taught your whole life. That was like, oh, I gained weight and I don't care. Because guess what? It's okay to gain weight. And it's not a failure and it's not a bad thing. And like my body needed this. And there is a context in which I discovered, like, forget everything I had been told about what that meant. Like this is okay. This is good. And this does not have to be what I was always told that it was, which is a bad thing. So it comes down to, for me, like what I'm doing with my body. But I also recognize the limitations in that. I'll be quite honest, because I don't want to, for the rest of my life, have made the switch from like, oh, the only thing that matters about my body is what it looks like. Okay, I don't think of that anymore. But I don't know that now the only thing that matters about my body is what I do. I don't want that to be it either, because I want to get to a place, and I'm getting there. But again, it takes time, where it doesn't have to be either do or look. It's just, it is. My body just is this, and I can be okay with that without needing to do anything with it. So that's kind of the next step.
I think that's going to be something. I'm just reflecting on what I'm feeling, having said that, and I think that that's something that, like, there will be different phases of what feels best for our body throughout our lives, especially as we begin to age more, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Where, like, for us now, I think we're both in our mid, early mid 30s, where, like, the things that we can do now as 30 something year olds is going to be very different
100%.
when we're 50 something. Right.
Exactly.
And that like definition of what makes our body feel best now is going to be different in 10 years versus what it was 10 years ago.
Right. I can't say, like, as long as I can, like, deadlift a lot or whatever, I'll feel good in my body. Well, guess what? That's not going to be the case at some point in the future. Right. So it has to come from some other place of feeling good about myself. And that's why I say it just, what is the context of your life currently, and what are your values? What do you care about, and what matters to you at this point in your life? Yes.
So I want to talk about the article that turned me on to your writing. And this was right after Donald Sutherland died. The title of the article is "The Quiet Pain of, quote, Ugly Men. Cruelty about men's looks is the scourge of us all." And I'm just going to read some of I'm sure every writer loves having their own writing read to them.
That's all right.
So Donald Sutherland, I'll put a picture in this if any of you don't know what he looks like, but he was, what's his name? The president in President Snow.
He was President Snow, yeah.
In Hunger Games, and in a million other things too. After being teased in school for his looks and called Dumbo by his classmates, Donald asked his mother if he was good looking, to which she cagily replied that his face had character. This caused him to hide in his bedroom for a day and carry around his hurt for the next 65 years. I've seen some related chatter about Donald's looks, comments about, no, he's so hot, actually. That's not the conversation that matters. What matters is that men are negatively affected by a looks-obsessed culture just like the rest of us. While women in particular are unquestionably held to higher standards and norms around beauty and have historically suffered more under them, you can't look at the pain in Donald Sutherland's eyes and tell me that men in general are necessarily less bothered by being deemed unattractive. That, I mean, just as an opener to an article, is just a banger.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because it's true. Like I, as a former high school boy who was desperate for attention from the opposite sex and got none of it, partially because of my own self-esteem and self-confidence issues,
right?
And general obliviousness as to what flirting was when I was in high school. There is so much self-inflicted emotional pain in thinking that you're ugly or unattractive, and thinking that who you are right now, whether you're 15 or 50 or 32, is not good enough to not even go so far as to be loved, but to be respected, to be cared for, to be acknowledged as a human being, or to be seen. talk to me. I want to hear more about your perspective of like what drove you to write this article, and I'm gonna read more of your writing to you as we go on.
Okay. That's fine. It's okay. I'm used to it. You know, you have to encounter your own work over and over again, no matter how much it makes you cringe.
I mean, we're here because it's great. So
yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with it. Trust me, there is so much worse writing that I would cringe at from my history.
Let's read something you wrote in middle school. How about that?
We'll go deep into the archives.
I called your mom before this interview, and
oh God, she would just want me to like read something that I wrote like about her. You know, she would like turn it into the. My mom's first name is Carmela, so it would become the Carmela Show.
Oh boy.
This is funny because I think sometimes with writing, at least for me on Substack, I feel like the pieces that tend to like do well or that I feel better about are ones that I don't like sweat over for too long. Like this one, I saw, you know, he died the next day. All of the stuff was coming out about his life and retrospectives of his career. And I saw all this stuff and I just kind of fired off. Like I was pissed. Like I was just, it's not always a good idea to write, just fire things off when you're pissed. But it was more that I was sad. There's a video embedded in that post of him talking to Anderson Cooper. And that's when he told this story about his mother, you know, not affirming that he's beautiful no matter what in her eyes. And, you know, it's Donald Sutherland at 70, whatever years old he was, to this day, getting choked up and crying at that memory. And it made me cry. And it made me think like, damn, we are all so damaged by, I mean, two things. What happens to us when we're young? You said it a little while ago, like the shit that we encounter about our bodies, our looks, anything, our abilities, who we are, whatever. When we are kids, I mean, it has the potential to just stick with us until the end of time. And it also made me think what I guess at some point I wrote in the piece, which is like, you can't tell me that this isn't bad for men too. Because I wrote another piece at some point in the Substack about jokes about dicks, like small dick jokes. Or
I
like,
read that too.
Yeah, like because yep. I just feel like there's a lot of hypocrisy in how people talk about bodies when like we need there to be the perspective that we shouldn't go after people's looks. We shouldn't comment on people's bodies. We shouldn't, you know, make fun of people or take issue with things that people cannot control or change about their bodies. Yes, yes, and yes. But then I do not see that same grace or those same rules afforded to men sometimes. And I just like think that's fucked up. And I think it doesn't, I think it's unkind. And I also just think it doesn't make any sense because if we are going to try to have a kinder, more accepting, better body culture for everyone, we have to afford that grace to everyone, even if it feels difficult or even if we don't want to. Like, I know that it's very easy to go after monstrous, odious men in politics or whatever for their bodies. But like, I don't think we should do that either. I hate to say it, but like, there's other shit we can go after when it comes to terrible people. I just think we can't say out of one side of our mouths, we want this, and then not give that to everyone. So when I see the Donald Sutherland, you know, interview, yeah, it makes me really sad. But I also think that I think in the post I wrote about how there was the New York Times piece about like rodent men, like here are these celebrity men that look like mice or whatever. And I'm really not trying to be like a wet blanket that doesn't want anybody to laugh or whatever. Like I get like the risk. I understand that the risk of writing about stuff is sometimes you really seem like a scold. So, you know, I will accept that risk, but I just cannot have any other perspective than, hey, if you don't want people to come after your looks, you can't go after other people's. That this is like, these are very simple principles to me. And that Donald Sutherland piece, it did really well. Like a lot of people really, you know, latched onto it. It's what brought you to my work. And so I think that it's something that goes unsaid, but a lot of people feel, because I think people worry that like, I'm going to come off like a men's rights activist or something. Like we're just talking about people in general. We're talking about human beings, and we all We all face stuff that fucks us up, and that is just what I want to talk about.
It's so funny that you say that I'm going to come off as a men's rights activist thing, because that, first of all, those three words together are just a hilarious conglomeration of words.
Right.
But what I do think is lost in that conversation, because like there's a way in which you could classify me and the Hot Fat Guy Club as a men's rights activism group, right? Sure. But the difference is when you look at it through the lens of, okay, men have had centuries of power and control over the way society is run.
Yeah.
Women have been trying for centuries to save us from ourselves and have failed at that effort at no fault of their own. Mm-hmm. But again, because of the number one tenet of traditional masculinity ideology, which is the resistance to all things feminine, that they were doomed from the start from trying to save us. And that only, and it is my opinion, that only men can save other men. And we have to be the ones to get our hooks into all of these, you know, incels, red-pilled men, and, you know, the taints that follow Tate, all of these, you know, the Ben Shapiro's little and Charlie Kirk's little cult of weirdos, and like all of that. There have to be other men that set the example and bring them to the light side. And then, in my opinion, because, you know, assuming that the majority of these men are straight, right, and do want a woman to touch them and love them at some point in their lives, and then let the women take over and fix them. Well, not fix them, but you know, bring them further down the path. Right. But like they've got to be hooked in by other men.
I completely agree with that. There was the post that I wrote about like men and eating disorders, and because I kept seeing stuff on TikTok where women would like stitch videos of guys, like, you know, gym guys, like weighing their chicken and shit, and they would be like, you have an eating disorder, like you're an idiot, like look how stupid you are for like caring about your body fat or whatever. And I'm like, look, I know how fun it is to like dunk on gym bros or whatever, but this does not fix anything, because none of these men who may or may not have eating disorders, struggles, issues, that you, like, a woman making fun of them will not save them or help them. What will help them are other gym bros who they respect and probably want to look like, going, hey bro, let's be careful that we don't walk off of the end of the diving board into eating disorder land, right? Like, and that's why there are a lot of like dude creators who are saying like, I love working out, but as soon as I became a professional bodybuilder, I got an eating disorder. Let's talk about it. Like, do people within the community need to be talking about it? Not it can't be a lecture coming from someone outside of the community.
Yes. Do you know who Jeff Nippard is?
That sounds so familiar. Fitness guy?
Yeah, he's a fitness guy. He's like 5'7", absolutely ripped. He's a YouTuber, TikToker.
Yeah.
I love his work. And I'm always undecided with the fitness YouTuber, TikToker people. I like to, before I make a decision on anybody, I always like to do a pretty deep dive and like get to know their work. He made a video that's on YouTube called "Is Obesity a Choice?" And he does such an unbelievable job of not only being really scientific but incredibly empathetic. And like the moment that sealed it for me was, he was like, if you gave every single fat person in the world the opportunity to hit a button that says, would I want to be classified as obese or not? Do I want to be at this size or not be? Like, I would press the button to say no, you know, based on the ridicule. Like, if you ask me that question from like 16 to 26, I would smash that button every single time. Yeah. And, you know, I have always been bigger. I was born fat. I was an 18-pound fucking baby. Like, stop. Maybe 16. I don't know. My mom the number changes constantly. I was fucking huge and have always been fucking huge.
Oh my God.
And, you know, this has been my default for my entire life. And if I could hit a button and look like Brad Pitt in Fight Club, I fucking would. Now, less so. But like, we're not, you know, especially for people who have never been fat, they don't understand the hatred that we get purely for existing. Right? We would not willingly put ourselves into that hot tub full of piranhas and acid. You know, we're not conscious. Some people maybe, but for the majority of us, we're not consciously making this choice. Right. What we are doing is trying to find ways to love ourselves and accept ourselves and be comfortable with the meat sack in the body that we currently have. Yeah. And he breaks down like all of the metabolic differences and all of the scientific reasons for why every person's metabolism and body is different, and how just like the varying levels of physical effort and diet effort and all of these other things that go into each individual person's ability to look and feel a certain way. And I was like, you fucking get it.
Yeah.
Thank God. Thank God there's at least one.
Right. Right. I mean, you like having that come from, I Googled him, like some ripped gym bro saying this, that's like very helpful, because then you gain the understanding that not everyone who isn't fat is like an enemy. Some people are understanding the complexities and the nuance of this, because that's what it is. That's what it's all about. You need people who are not like you, who you might think are not like biased or whatever, to be like, no, this is still the situation. This is still the reality of it. Yeah. That's great.
The experiences that I had with the Wilhelmina sports and fitness models was one of some of the most like holistic and healing experiences I had, because again, like being in a room of objectively some of the hottest people I've ever been around in my entire life, and being the only fat person in that room, and I am also shirtless with all of the other guys. Not a single person, not even a negative or positive comment. No one made a comment about my body. They just treated me like I was one of them. Right. Yeah. And that was, it was the first time I ever took my shirt off in a public setting like that, especially during that weight loss journey between 2015 and 2018, was with them. And, everyone else had their shirt off and they were like, come on, you too. And I was like, oh yeah. Okay. And it wasn't in like a, come on, do the truffle shuffle. Like, no, come on. You're one of us. This is how it's going to work. And I was like, yeah. And no, it was just, I have some really great pictures of like all of us together and me shirtless. My friend James, in the blog post that I just put out, he is a Men's Health model and has been on the cover of Men's Health a couple times. And he has as many abs as there are islands in the atolls. And James McMillan, if you want to look him up. Okay. J Fit for Life on Instagram. And he used to teach at Tone House in New York City. And if you know, Tone House is fucking insane. And whenever I would take class there with him, he and I would always take a shirtless picture after class. And it was always so like fun and affirming for me, because it was like one of these things is not like the other, but they're both equally hot for different fucking reasons. I love that. And that's another thing. My therapist called me out on this last week. She's like, you make a lot of Baskin Robbins references. But I say this all the time of like, hot fat guys are hot fat guys because everyone likes a different flavor. I saw the Jack Black discourse on Twitter is always one of my favorite things, because like every once in a while you see a tweet where it's like, I know hundreds of women who would throw themselves under a bus to have a shot to get on top or under Jack Black. Like quintessential hot fat guy, right? We all like different flavors. There's a reason there are 31 flavors at Baskin Robbins. We all like a different flavor. We are allowed to like what we like. Right.
I think it's so interesting that you bring up what are real life experiences versus what we encounter on the internet, because there is so much value in people's hesitance to get into the gym because they think that gym people are going to like be mean and elitist and shitty. And like, yes, it can be that space 100%. I also, in working as a fitness instructor and getting into the gym when I was completely new to the gym, there are also a lot of people that are like very cool to you there, no matter what you look like, because they just like working out and they're like glad that you are too. Mm-hmm. So I think like, yes, we can have that little bit of like, oh, what's it going to be? It can be very intimidating to get into a fitness space. But I also think that in real life, not always, certainly not, because we know we had the bullies when we were little kids in school and later on in our lives too. But I think there is a lot more like venom and bullshit and just meanness thrown against bodies on the internet more than I see in real life, right? That's just like the case. That's just the case for everything. People feel emboldened to be assholes when they're sitting behind a screen. And when you get out into the real world, like you see that most people I see in the real world do not look like Brad Pitt in Fight Club, and everybody has their own shit that they're dealing with their body. And so for the most part, people are not lashing out at other people because of their bodies all the time. That doesn't mean it's not a problem in the culture, but I think that putting ourselves in those spaces sometimes can be really healing, like you were just saying, because you realize like, oh, okay, like most people are just, they're just chill. It's like fine. They just are, trying to get through the day themselves. So
Yep.
sometimes that can be very, very helpful too. At least it was for me.
Yeah. 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 They're, the people on the internet that want to say shitty stuff to you about your body, they're saying it because there's no threat of getting punched in the face when
Well,
they say
right.
it.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Like that's my favorite line is say that to me in person.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
they wouldn't.
they wouldn't, you wouldn't, you're too scared. Like
No.
you do not have the, the grit to say something that mean to someone in real life, because
Right.
also you're a coward, right? You're saying
Yeah.
this because of your own insecurities that you clearly have not dealt with, and you're
Mhm.
not going to say this to someone in person. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen sometimes. I used to be a daily yoga person.
Mm.
And for a while, my ex roommate used to work at the Equinox Sports Club in Lincoln Center, the like super, super fancy one.
Wow. Yeah.
And I went to I went there for a while, and I went to this yoga class one time, and I show up, and there's this just like quintessential never left the frat finance bro sitting next to me, which like clearly he left a little bit because he's sitting in this yoga class, and it was a hot yoga class. It was the advanced level. And he looks at me and was like, hey man, are you sure you can take this class? It's really hard. And I
No.
was like, oh no, I've never taken a yoga class before. I guess we'll have to see. And he like shot me a look, and then I just like went back to doing my thing.
Yeah.
I proceeded to kick his ass for
I
that
bet.
whole class. And I looked at him after and was like, hey man, are you sure you can take this
Yeah.
class? It's
How'd you
really
do?
hard. And he
I
was
really
like,
like I can't even imagine saying that. Like, and that's the thing. That's what sucks, because it's like guys like that. That's what make people get so freaked out and think that
Mhm.
everyone at the gym is going to be an asshole. But you know what? Just like how there are assholes out in the world, there will be assholes in your fitness classes and at the gym. The thing that I feel like was really surprising to me when I started working out was that like it builds resilience in all areas. So like sometimes I see this in videos online and stuff, and I get where it's coming from, where people will say like, don't worry about the gym, nobody else is looking at you at the gym, nobody else is judging you. And with all due respect, like sometimes they are. Like people look at each other, people judge each other, people fucking record each other in the gym because they're dicks, they shouldn't do it, but they do it. So I don't think it's that, oh no, no one's looking at you. I think it's ultimately if you stick around and start to feel better about yourself and more confident, you don't care if they're
Yeah.
looking at you. Like,
Yep.
I don't give a shit if someone is like looking at me sideways in the gym, because I'm there to take care of business, right? But when I first started, that was very scary. It's
Yeah.
like you just kind of have to get over that hump. And that goes back to what you asked me about like feeling good in my body. That's just like confidence, that's just body confidence, and that doesn't have to come from exercise. It can come from thinking of yourself as hot and like just faking it until you make it, right? Tapping into that self-esteem that I think gets kind of pulled away from us our whole lives. But I wonder if you think that the people who troll you on the internet and tell you that you're like, what did you say earlier, like you're promoting an unhealthy lifestyle or whatever, because you're right, they don't care about that, they don't actually give a shit about that, whether you're healthy or not. I think that they're mad that you call yourself hot. Is that what you
Yeah.
think? Yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
that's why they're mad, because that challenges our idea of what hotness is. And if you are someone who works very hard to look a certain type of hot, that someone else is like, no, I'm hot too, that might put you in your feelings about like, oh, well, what have I been working toward? Or like, what do I have to offer if not this is the one, my hotness is the one thing on the table, right?
One of my favorite things to do, period, is going out into the world and I live in New York City, and watching dude bros who have, less personality than they do muscles,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
try to like flirt with women doing the things that they've seen in like a pickup artist video kind of
Sure.
thing, and do the whole peacock and dude bro thing, right? And I love to treat it like I'm, I pretend like I'm listening to David Attenborough narrating it and watching them just like try and fail.
Yep.
And it is one of my favorite things in the world to watch them attempt to buy a woman a drink or ask that woman out, fail epically at it, and then I will go to that same woman and start making fun of that guy to her.
Mm.
And literally there have been hundreds of instances where I have gotten her number and we've had a drink together, we've gone on a date, we've made out at the bar, whatever. And to watch their eyes bulge out of their fucking head, like, that fat fuck, what?
Right.
What? And even like, and most of the time I'm like not even trying to, make that connection. I just like watching them lose their fucking minds.
Yeah.
And when there's nothing more threatening than a fat person being confident and charismatic and comfortable with who they are.
It's like the Jack Black thing. Like, why do people like him? Because he's clearly like comfortable with himself and having a great fucking time. Like, the end.
What happens when you're around people who are comfortable about yourselves?
You feel good. They make you feel good. Yeah.
You feel good, and you feel that you're in a safe place to be authentic because you're around authentic fucking people.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's why I love your message, because sometimes like we can just take your body out of it for a second and think about just, if I find a way to feel good, that is what this is all about, whether weight loss is involved with that or not, whether the gym is like, it doesn't matter what is or is not involved. If you find a way to truly, seriously feel good internally, that is going to be very contagious to other people. Mm-hmm. You are going to attract goodness into your life and other people's lives. And that's why like all of these movements, I think sometimes a lot of like infighting happens when it comes to body stuff and body positivity and diet culture, and people like get really fired up about stuff because all of this stuff is difficult and painful. I get it. But ultimately, I think we all have this like same goal, which is we want to create a culture where people feel like they can just be okay, mm-hmm. like no matter what, with themselves, or at least try to. And like, if we had that, we wouldn't have guys like next to you in yoga, like, are you sure you can do the class? Because like, that's mean. Like, we wouldn't have that if he felt secure with himself, he wouldn't have said that to you. Right. So that's what we want, is for everyone to like not be shitty to each other in yoga class.
Right. It's like, we're not in fucking high school anymore, bud. Just shut the fuck up and leave me alone. It's there. I've told this story on the show a couple of times, but I was at a rave a couple of years ago, it was last summer. And I'm with my partner and our other partner and a bunch of our friends. And I almost always end up shirtless at a dance party because I'm not only am I figuratively hot, I'm literally hot.
Yes.
It's hot.
Yeah.
I'm sweating. And, there are other things that are maybe running through my blood system that are making the sweating worse.
Yeah.
I'm vibing, and like, I became an opera singer because I can't do choreography to save my life, but I will tear up a dance floor.
Oh my God.
These three dude bros come up to me and they're like, yeah, bro, love the confidence. And I just looked at them and I'm like, fuck you. You wish you were half as fucking confident as me. Get the fuck out of here. And
what
they
is
were like,
about people saying that? When I was at the heaviest that I ever was, that's when you get to be told that you have a pretty face and that you're so confident, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, just, you know what? Say less. I don't need, mm-hmm. Yes, I'm confident, but like, you can have that too. And it doesn't have to be because you're skinnier, because you actually said it at the beginning of this podcast. I think at first, when I lost a bunch of weight, that was the most insecure I'd ever been in my life. Like I was a newborn, like little baby deer, like trying to walk, like, wait, why is everyone being weird to me? Why do I feel weird? I don't recognize myself in pictures. Like, did everybody hate me when I was fat? Why is everyone being nice to me? Like, it's so confusing and bizarre and unsettling mm-hmm. to have a big body change. And I think that just speaks to like, our bodies are not irrelevant. They have a lot to do with how we move through the world and how other people treat us. And it requires so much care that most people do not afford to other people. And we have to give it to ourselves. Like, that's what this is all about.
Oh, and something that I see talked about on the internet a lot because I exist in those circles, but I think that a lot of people don't acknowledge is that when you do go through a major weight loss change like that, that everyone treats you differently as a
Oh my
result of
God.
it.
Yeah.
They assume that you're more intelligent, that you're more wealthy, you're more capable, you're more this, you're more that, and that was
Yeah.
something that was really mind-boggling for me. Is like, the meat sack is different. The person is the same.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
just crankier and hungrier. But that's something that is it's definitely a shock to the system,
Mhm.
having all of your suspicions about how shallow
Yeah.
everyone is
Yes.
confirmed.
Yeah, exactly.
But now, as someone who like did essentially gain back all of the weight that I lost,
Hmm.
like I'm able to take that confidence that I felt and that was kind of put on to me by other people when I was skinnier, and like
Mm.
that made me feel hot and powerful and this and that, and take that and incorporate that into my energy now that I am back in
Mm.
my bigger size, right?
Because
Because
you're still the
again,
same. You're still the same person. It's still
exactly,
you.
it's still
Yeah.
the same fucking person.
Right.
I was still that charismatic, I was still that energetic, I was still that fun, I still had this, it's the same stories,
Right. Yeah.
it's just that the present excuse me, the presentation is a little different now.
Yeah.
And again, everyone likes a different flavor.
Hmm.
The idea I saw a TikTok of some guy who goes to like UT Austin, doing a bunch of fit checks, and he's a bigger dude. He probably weighs about like 300, 350, 400 pounds, right?
Hmm.
Big hot fat guy.
Hmm.
And some fucking dude makes a video of like, bro, this is exactly the problem with our society today. This guy's spending all this time focusing on his outfits when he should be gym maxing. Fuck you. Fuck you. Shut the fuck up.
I can't even take it seriously when you say the word gym maxing.
Right. Like, come on, dude. Like, what are you talking about?
At least get better branding for your concept.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, you took this thing of this dude putting in an immense amount of effort to
Right.
look good and to feel good, and he's doing this for himself.
Yeah.
And then you have to put your own judgment on it. No,
Yeah.
no, not how it works. And like, that guy is perfect exactly as he is right now. He doesn't have to change anything about himself to be he is I tried reaching out to him to get him a Hot Fat Guy Club shirt, right?
Oh,
Like, you are a hot fat guy. You are in the Hot Fat Guy Club, my friend. And like, there are, I guarantee you, there are people out there that want that are attracted to that saw that video and are like, I got to slide into those DMs because it
because he likes
exists for every.
himself. 'Cause he
Right,
likes himself. Yeah.
right. Like, at the end of the day, what you look like matters. It matters. It absolutely matters, but it matters so much less than how you present yourself and
Mhm.
how you treat people and how you act and how good your stories are and how energetic you are and how charming you are. And are you on TikTok at all?
Barely, I have to be honest. I have
Did
not. I can't.
were you
penetrate.
clued in at all to the alpha dom discourse?
Yeah, yes, I came across in the wilds of the internet. Yeah.
I made a video about what the number one thing women actually want like from a man in a
Mm,
dating setting, and it was
okay,
to
let's
be
hear it.
safe, to feel safe.
Yeah, you got it.
That's the number one fucking thing. And like, that might be different for every person, right? But the majority, like, the whole man versus bear thing, like, bear 100%. Women want to feel safe, and nothing else can happen until you feel
Yeah,
safe with another person.
that is the foundation of the house right there.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And if you like, what you look like is so much. I just like, be a good person, be charismatic, be energetic, be safe, make people feel safe around you, and good things will come.
Right. Couldn't
Yeah.
agree more.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've been talking for a little over an hour now. I
It's
feel
so
like we
fun.
could go on forever. We'll have to
Yeah.
do this again soon. But
Love it.
Mikala, this was awesome. Shamelessly promote yourself. Where can everybody find you?
Best place to find me is on Substack. So just search for Body Type. That is the name of my publication. And I have a book in the works. So any announcements about that would be on the Substack as well. Sometimes I freelance other places, but I would link to all of that on the Substack. So yeah, just check out Body Type.
Awesome. Well, Mikala, thank you so much. You are an honorary hot fat guy. And
Yay!
to everyone listening, don't forget to like, subscribe, tell us how much you loved Mikala, and take up space, my friends. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.